Welcome to In the Spotlight. I could not be more excited to be joined by three of my favorite musicians, composers, and ritual creators. Starting with Joey Weisenberg. He's a musician, composer, and teacher, the founder and director of Hadar's Rising Song Institute, which cultivates grassroots musical spiritual creativity in Jewish community. He is the author of The Torah of Music, which won the 2017 National Jewish Book Award. It actually beat out my book.
Oh, no.
Own it, I've had a lot of Jewish therapy. You deserved it. And Building Singing Communities. Joey's 8th album of original music, Leila, was released in early 2022 on Rising Song Records. Elana Arian is a composer. She's a good friend of mine. I just messed up her name. A multi-instrumentalist and spiritual leader, an extraordinary one, who recently released her 4th album of original music called The Other Side of Fear. She has performed at Carnegie Hall, Lincoln Center, Tanglewood, and the Obama White House, and her music is part of Jewish communal life across the globe. She serves proudly on the faculty of Hebrew Union College, the Wexner Summer Institute, and Hava Nashira. And finally, last but not least, another friend, Noah Aronson, who I have been so privileged to actually collaborate with. I hope we'll get to that at some point. He earned a degree in jazz composition and piano at Berklee College of Music. He was composer in residence at Temple Beth Elohim in Wellesley, Massachusetts. He's recorded 6 full-length albums of original music, his latest being Move, M-O-V-E, birthed from his revoice method, which he'll describe in our conversation today. In 2020, Noah started a platform called Be Major, where he regularly hosts concerts, workshops, and classes online. Welcome to you all.
Nice to be here.
It really is exciting to be here, and I wish we could just play music throughout the whole time, but I will tell our viewers that in the warm-up you chose to do, in a way, a nigun, a chord, a piece of music that got us to a place that I certainly feel creates a little bit of ritual even in this studio, and I'm so grateful to you all. So let's start with the Talmud. It's always a good, safe space to start, especially on a Jewish broadcast. I think we're at Brachot 6a, where the quote is, this in English, where there is song, there is prayer. Or alternately translated, where there is music, there is prayer. I want to start with you, Joey. What does that phrase mean to you, or have you seen it in a way made real in your experience, in your work?
Yeah, I mean, for me, prayer and music are kind of indistinguishable. They have different characteristics, but music is sort of like a symptom of real prayer. You know, it's like when you're really letting the deepest feelings out of oneself, you know, then it often comes with music, or music comes out from that process. And also, it's music comes before prayer, which is that music helps cut away the nonsense from around our ears and around our hearts, so that we might be able to actually feel our prayers and let them into the world.
And in your book, you actually talked a lot about how our tradition speaks a lot about music. In a way, it's a roadmap for how integral the music should be. So when I read that line from Talmud, it's not, to you, is it a forced idea, or is it actually baked in?
Oh, I mean, if you read carefully, when I read the words of the Siddur, the Jewish prayer book, after a while it starts to seem like just one big love song to existence. It really is. Almost every page has references to singing and to music and to song, and it's like, how could it not be about that, you know? And that's true throughout so many of the books and the dreamscapes of our sages. You know, they were all obsessed with music, and it was not just that music was beautiful, it was that music was a metaphor for being alive.
Elana, how does that line from Talmud resonate for you, if it does?
It definitely does. I mean, I would imagine for all three of us, there's some sort of fundamental truth to, like, music being a first line to prayer in a way. I know as a child, like growing up with, you know, parents in the Jewish world, I was in lots of services, you know, and was like a good kid in services. But I know that for me, my earliest and deepest sort of connected prayer moments were always to do with times that I was surrounded by music, in a dining hall at a Jewish summer camp, or on the floor in someone's living room leading a service. The music was always the pathway, and so it definitely resonates with me just from a personal perspective of like the deepest prayers that I've ever felt, the deepest moments of prayers have always been musical.
Noah?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's no surprise that you brought us all here together in this way, because we all have kind of tasted that fruit, so to speak, of the beauty and what is possible with music in prayer spaces. And it certainly for me has been my pathway into Jewish communal life. It's been through music. But I also want to add in that I also feel that movement is an integral piece to the prayer experience that we don't often highlight as much. And I've been fascinated by just the movement from within and what song can inspire within us, and then what gets us to start moving, and then what moves a space, and how music can kind of move us spiritually, emotionally, and then also how it propels our prayers outwards and upwards.
And obviously, if you go to the average synagogue, people are not moving around.
Yeah,
they are standing still. And I will say that sometimes my impulse even to move is kind of hindered by my self-consciousness in a sense that it's not appropriate.
Yeah.
So how do you see the roadblocks in a way to ritual when you look at kind of what our institutions have given us? And not that there was anything wrong with it, but it wasn't necessarily unfettered and free.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily unself-conscious. It was kind of contained and very structured.
Yeah, I mean, I think our Jewish prayer experience has evolved a lot over the years, and especially as it's come from Europe over to the States, and it's adopted and become part of the landscape of the American Christian experience and the American experience as well. I mean, that's my personal experience with Jewish practice. But so it sometimes it looks like churches. When it hasn't always been like that, at least in like the more progressive wings. So I think that like sitting in pews is not necessarily helpful for us, and there's a lot of congregations that are moving towards modular seating. But I think that it would be a lot more freeing if there was actually no seats at all, or if you had a choice of where to put your seat, and you can sit when you want to sit and you stand when you want to stand. But we have enough space to move around and let ourselves express a little bit more freely. I think that the roadblock is kind of the sitting in pews and all facing in the same direction, when that's just not how humanity works. That's not how the spiritual experience works. It's a little bit more fluid than that.
And Elana, what other roadblocks do you see? I mean, I won't give you all of mine, but often music is an impulse that we check in a way, and particularly in a spiritual setting. What have you seen gets in the way of people really kind of getting inside the music?
That's a great question. I mean, I was really nodding vigorously. I don't know if I was on camera for that when Joey was talking about the way that music sort of can, you said it more beautifully, but sort of short circuit the brain parts of things. And I think that for me personally, and also I see in congregational life, just the sort of analytical, neurotic, for a better word, the deeply Jewish parts of us that are worrying about various things and maybe thinking about other things and distracted by other things. There's also, I think, certainly in Reform Judaism, there's a lot of self-consciousness about people feeling like they don't know enough to really participate in the right way, or they know they're supposed to bow here, but they're looking around, or maybe there's just this feeling that maybe I don't know enough, or I'm not learning enough.
Ignorance.
Yeah, to like really throw myself in, and we know from all the different types of communities that we've led worship in or just led singing in, that all you need is a willingness to let go, and sometimes I think that our inhibition, that burden of feeling like you may not be, the imposter thing of not knowing enough to really be participating fully, I think is a major roadblock to just feeling the freedom to let yourself get carried away. Part of that feeling of prayer is letting yourself get carried away, go there.
Joe, you describe, I don't think it was in an interview possibly, of just the folded arm that you often start, and sometimes in Orthodox settings, particularly really observant settings, where there's part of the room is kind of like, okay, where are you taking me? What is
Impress me.
Yeah, impress me. Or I don't have time for this. You say, I could be, studying page of Gemara, and now I'm, pounding on the table, or whatever, the Joey Weisenberg way of taking you on a journey. I don't have time for that journey. So how does one, and again, I'm putting myself in, it's the proverbial other, how do you kind of navigate the skepticism, the resistance?
Oh yeah, well I've got plenty of that myself to get started, but there's this, I like to lean into the awkward moment. I found that the more awkward things get, the more quickly things get awkward, the more quickly we will all just accept that basically everything is awkward, and then it gives this kind of openness to grow from there. So a lot of times we'll just start doing something and I'll be really quiet or just singing really softly. I'm not making a nice, beautiful saccharine sound that puts everybody at ease, and then and myself too, I realize I have preconceived notions about what this is going to be, and I want to just try to let it be what it is. But I think it's all in terms of movement, and what you're saying about freedom, I just resonate with this line that Brother David Steindl-Rast said, that religion used to be like a volcano, and it would just come out like this, but the way we've inherited it has been as hardened rock, right? And we're trying to imagine what it might have been like, right? And what it would have been like when it was hot and flowing and kind of in its origin.
I want to just play the first clip. This is Noah Aronson's Kol Hanshama. Am I pronouncing it correctly?
It's a great pronunciation.
So let's just take a minute and watch this, and then we'll come back.
Hallelujah, 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 Kol Hanshama, hallelujah, 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 Kol Hanshama, hallelujah, 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 Kol Hanshama,
So coming out of this beautiful piece, you're in your apartment and you're barefoot with this music, and it just struck me. I found myself dancing watching it, but there's something not sacrilegious, but you're off the beaten path, choosing to do that. We're getting the Hebrew, we're getting emotion, we're getting Judaism with a very different picture. So if you could talk a little bit about just the sort of the freedom of that, and also a sense of a little bit about defying the norms.
Well, thank you. I mean, I don't know if you know, but for the last 2 years, a lot of us have been kind of trapped in our apartments for a long time.
Wait, what?
Yeah, this happened to me. I don't know if it happened to everybody, but so I've had to find my spirituality on my own, in my own space, by myself, and oftentimes that's without shoes and socks on. But this doesn't mean the texts are not still flowing through, and that the music is not still flowing through. And so we kind of. I loved the freedom of actually being able to just explore and experiment in my own space. And before the pandemic, I don't think I would have put a camera on myself doing those things in my room. But I think that the last 2 years have opened up this intentionality within me that this can be taken wherever we are. We don't have to be in a sanctuary. We don't have to be in an ashram. Wherever people find their holiness, that can happen in your bedroom. That can happen in the gym. It can happen walking down the street.
And what about that text in particular?
Kol Hanshama, I love that there's just many different ways of translating it. You can think of it as all of our neshama, all of our spirit joins together to praise. Or you can reshift the word. Neshima is breath. So we're using all of our breath. We turn our breath into song. There's I just love that one line of Psalm 150, and basically what I do in that video is just allow for myself to loop my voice and layer my voice over and over itself. So now it sounds like hundreds of voices are coming together, which again, I wasn't able to be present with people in sanctuary spaces the last 2 years, so I've had to layer my own voice over itself.
Like create a congregation.
Yeah, exactly.
Elana, we're going to play your Oseh Shalom, which is one of my favorites, and then talk about it.
Oseh Shalom B'Ramah Hu Yaseh Shalom Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu Ve'al kol
So you sang that song with your wonderful wife, cantor Julia Cadrain, who was then a cantor at Central Synagogue. I guess what I want to ask you about is the decision, the bravery of taking on liturgy that is familiar for people. People have their favorite Oseh Shaloms. So this is not, what was the psalm you mentioned, Noah, that you'd worked on, that you had created? What
Psalm 150?
Yes, Psalm 150 is maybe not so much in our lexicon the way that Oseh Shalom is. So what is there trepidation in taking on the canon, I would say?
I think that I've sort of always taken the teaching from Debbie Friedman of blessed memory. She talked about this idea of music as midrash. When people would come at her when she first sort of entered the scene, setting like a new Shema, let's say, for example,
Right.
How could you do that? You know, that's like Misinai from Sinai, and all of the resistance that came with that, and the feeling of, you know, being threatened by the idea that you could just do that. The freedom to just do that. Debbie used to talk about that, you know, just in the same way that rabbis for thousands of years have interpreted and reinterpreted our texts and tried to make new meaning and fresh meaning that connected with whatever the modern context of that time was, that when Jewish composers set sacred texts from thousands of years ago, they're themselves creating a midrash on the text, an interpretation of the text. So that's kind of the way that I approach writing music settings of liturgy. Whether it's like something that's a little bit less well known in Reform and where I'm come from in the Reform circle, or if it's something like Oseh Shalom, the idea that, you know, why write a new one? You know, because we need all of our voices and interpretations, and we need the new idea of how that text sits in our context right now.
And it was anathema. I mean, unimaginable when she did it. It was revolutionary, and she got a lot of naysayers and pushback. And now her Mishaberach is sung sometimes in Orthodox settings. It's so it feels like liturgy.
Yeah,
like,
it's in our prayer book. I mean, it's in the Reformed prayer book.
Incredible.
Words.
But I mean, I've been into many, more non-Reform synagogues that use it. But you knew her, and I'd just love you to take a minute and talk about why she was particularly influential for you.
I'd love to. Debbie was a friend of my parents. My dad, Rabbi Rami Arian, is a Reform rabbi, and my mom, Mary Lovenger-Arian, Professor Mary Lovenger-Arian, is a professor at Hebrew Union College. And so, and they were like, hippie song leaders at the same time as Debbie. And Debbie was a close friend of my mom's. And so I just had the good fortune as a kid to have her be like a presence in my life. And so when I graduated from college, when I first moved back to New York, I was working as like a secular folk singer, like girl with guitar, touring around. And in those earliest gigs in New York City, like in the worst, like just picture the worst place that you don't want to play a show ever. In like the basement underneath that place is like where you have your first gig in New York City. Debbie used to come and hear me, which was amazing. And she would schlep down from the Upper West Side and like be surprised if someone recognized her and just like be the way she was. And from a very early time, she would come up to me after the shows and say, oh, that was so great, blah, blah, blah. Listen, Elana, when are you gonna like write something for the Jews, She had that. Anyone who knew her can validate. She was a nudge, So that was her thing. And I kind of like would laugh and just be like, oh, Debbie, that's so funny. Like, I'm never doing that. So she really was integral in sort of planting the seed and really, pushing to the limit of what would be okay, that was what she saw me doing. And when I sort of found my way to this path, Debbie had already died. It was a couple years after she had died. And it was actually for me one of the purest like moments of like spontaneous prayer personally that I can remember was sort of the writing of the first piece of Jewish music that I had, the first setting of Jewish text that I had written, and I just could feel that Debbie's was just, she knew something about me deeply that I not only didn't know but like really resisted, and so I just feel her hand, in my path, and I'm grateful for it.
Wow.
Joey, your Sasa Nigun is one of the favorites, and we're going to play it right now and then talk about it.
1, 2, 1, 2.
So I want to talk about nigunim, have you define it, and say why it seems to me so core to what you do is that you're offering an accessibility, at least as I perceive it, that you don't necessarily need to have the Hebrew, need to have the vernacular, the vocabulary that sometimes can be a barrier. And even for those who do know it, it seems to a more visceral place. But I want to let you tell us why you think it's essential, if you do, for your music.
Yeah, well, nigun, you take out the words like you're saying. It's just hayamai, like that, and you just can go on for a long time, just either improvising a nigun or singing a very old one. And nigun, it's like words are amazing because they carry the poetry of our tradition and the wisdom. And yet words tend to, the better you get at words, the better you get at separating one thing from the next. And so a great academic can describe with clarity and precision a particular thing, and it separates one from the next. But music, its job is to sort of to heal the wounds that have been created by words, to find the unity that we lost in the process of labeling everything, right? And that's what the nigun is for in its spiritual sense. And also technically, it's also a nigun, I think, is different from a song, and I like both, but a song requires its words, and it requires its chords and its rhythms, and it requires all of the everything, maybe its movement, right? But the A nigun, it stands on its own. It's just pure melody, and you don't need anything else. Yeah, just that, and it says what it needs to say.
And you also emphasize the listening, that it's not just when you're teaching something, it isn't just about learning it, it's about listening to your neighbor singing it. And I wonder, for those who are new to a nigun, how do they learn if they don't know it already?
Right. Well, like they say about the very first part of the prayer in the morning is called Psuke de Zimra, which is the verses of song. But Zimra, which means song, also means to cut away. And so when we're singing, we are actually, we're cutting away the nonsense that surrounds our ears, right? And we're learning to hear. And we have to do that in order to get ready later in the prayers to say Shema, like you were saying. And Shema means listen, right? So the idea is we sing, and the singing allows us to listen, right? And that is actually what we're trying to do with any song or any prayer, is to learn how to tune ourselves in, to the world around us, to the people around us. What is going on with you guys?
Noah, I want to talk about repetition, because I was listening to, I had the joy of listening and preparing for this, and all of you, I would say, this is really a question for all of you, there's a lot of refrain. It isn't that you are replicating a chorus, for instance, or a musical kind of either a cadence or a pattern, but something is echoed, something comes back, and it allows us to, in a way, learn it quicker, to have us imbibe it in a way that is again less intellectual. How conscious is, I don't want to say redundancy because that sounds derogatory, refrain, repetition, coming back, repeating something that you know, and in a way making it simplifying so that we're not constantly going off in different directions musically?
Yeah. I think it's a song leading technique that I learned probably early on, probably from Debbie Friedman and like the great song leaders that I watched growing up. So I've started to try to build some of those song leading techniques into the music itself, because I saw it work. And now I write songs with that intentionality, knowing, okay, people need a little bit of time to absorb something. It's not going to happen on the first pass. It's not going to happen on the second pass. And so, but I also think that, like Joey was saying, each time we take a pass of something, it actually prunes a layer off, and we get the kind of deeper and deeper in. And so I'm incredibly moved by watching what can happen from start to middle to end of something when we've just been singing one thing over and over and again, and that's quite powerful.
So I'd love to play Eila Hamda, because it has a wonderful repetition there. And this is a text from Yedid Nefesh Piyut, which is a poem, right? Mm-hmm. You want to just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a poem we say on Friday nights, and this is really just an excerpt of that poem. I think people would be familiar with the Israeli version of it, and so this is, and even that is actually a Israeli Hebrew, modern Hebrew interpretation of Eile Machmad Libi, which actually is in the original text, which is so there. It's a modernization of something that is actually ancient. But what I love about it is that this line is saying to us, like, Eile Chamda Libi, this is what my heart is really wanting. Chusana ve'alna titalem, please, stop being so hidden. And especially after these 2 years, we've all been hidden from each other. We've all been behind Zoom screens. And what we really want is to be in community and not be invisible. We want to enter into community and say, this is where I'm seen. This is where I can be my full self, and it's okay to express myself, all of the feelings and the pain and the suffering and also the joy and the happiness. This is where I can go to share those things. So this is what my heart really wants, is to be seen and not be hidden anymore.
Wonderful. So we'll play that. Play that now.
Eile Chamda Libi, Eile Chamda Libi, hamda libi, eile 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 hamda libi. Khusana ve'al natitalem, Khusana ve'al natitalem.
Elana, I want to talk about children for a minute, and not just because you have two adorable ones, but because of the power of music, particularly, I think, in Jewish life, to engage a child. And you didn't write your song, I Have a Voice, I think, for children, but I've seen huge scenes of rooms of kids singing it, and kind of what it does for the room, for the children, for their kind of sense of ownership and energy and autonomy maybe in the world, power in the world. So can you just talk about this song in particular, and when you've worked with kids, which I know you have, either taught them or led them, is it a different population?
Yeah, well, I wrote that song at the URJ Kutz camp, which no longer exists. It was in their final summer 2019, and I was working at the time with a group of very inspiring teens, teen leaders who chose to spend their summer, learning how to do activism and advocacy and, song leading and learning Torah and stuff. And so I did sort of have a group of kind of young leaders in my head while I was writing that piece. But as I've had the joy of getting to sing it with lots of different populations, as you said, I feel more strongly like how much that message is not for kids. The chorus is just, I have a voice, my voice is powerful, my voice can change the world. And I think that, we just, each of us as adults, the elders in our community are being told that they don't matter anymore. Those of us sort of in the middle of the population are sort of being segmented and isolated and told like, well, there's nothing you can do about that. That's the way that things are, and kids feel like they can't do anything about anything. So the idea that to just be reminded of this sacred gift that we've been given, and that it matters that you have a voice and that you can, let's not just throw our hands up, we need to use it. And that's the only way that anything has ever changed, ever.
מלך העולם שעשנו בצלם אלוהים. I have a voice, my voice is powerful, my voice can change the world. I have a voice, my voice is powerful, my voice can change the world.
I guess I'll say I had one particularly powerful experience with this piece at our last biennial, I guess. The URJ biennial, Union for Reform Judaism, was in Chicago a few years back before the pandemic, and there was this magnificent gospel choir from children's gospel choir from Chicago, the Soul Children of Chicago, led by Dr. Walt Whitman. And they, sort of close to the day of the performance, someone from the union said to me, it'd be great to have kids sing that song, don't you think? I said, yeah, that would be great. Let's have kids. I thought it was going to be like a kids choir. And it was like this incredibly powerful, joyful, talk about movement. I mean, they were like just totally embodying this message. And I mean, I could cry just talking about it. Trying to perform that song in a sort of contained way, keeping it together, with seeing the joy and abandon that sort of the right words with the right music in the right mouths can do was like really one of the high spirituality points of my life.
Wow.
Joey, you talk about how when you...
Sounds awesome.
I was there. When you go to a place and you have, I don't know if you call it gigs, maybe that's like a 70s term. You said that you actually kind of explore the room. You knock on the walls and the tables. You kind of, you said the room becomes a participant in a way in what you're going to build. And I'd love you to just talk about the using of, Noah does some brilliant use of software, of like technology, in a way the cutting edge, and I sort of sometimes see you going really ancient to the piece of paper on the table because it's the only thing that's there.
Oh yeah, the yahrzeit list.
The best technology.
Last week's yahrzeit list is a really nice snare drum.
Oh no!
And I think they would appreciate.
I'm sure they would. So tell me what is that? That everything is an instrument? That the atmosphere is integral?
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, everything is a piece of the musical prayer, you know, and I don't know, like for example, right here, like if I'm going to make music, it would be a shame not to make music with you two. So like you know, so what do we have in the room right now? We've got a table, and we've got our voices. Ooh, not bad. So here, would you mind? You want to take one? Let's try that.
We saw it here, folks.
Thanks.
That's amazing.
To answer your question.
To answer the question, that answers the
Well,
question.
you know, we gotta,
Use your material.
why talk about it?
No,
if we can do it?
exactly. One of your last concerts was in 2019 at BJ, B'nai Jeshurun, and I watched the video, and I saw that, you know, I have been to many services at B'nai Jeshurun, but it became a different space. So I guess I would just like to ask, when you are going in and not knowing exactly what's going to happen, and this is where I'm obviously a type A New Yorker who doesn't want a lot of uncertainty. You have to really have permission for things to go awry, I guess I would ask.
That's
So
the best.
how does that genuinely, I mean, what if it doesn't work? And maybe, have you ever seen it not?
Oh yeah, it definitely doesn't work. I mean, it often doesn't work, and then oftentimes when it's most not worked, there's something right around the corner that's about to work.
Okay.
Right, and you're panicking on the inside, and maybe everybody else is too. And it's like the proverbial story about having to go out into the unowned desert in order to find wisdom, which is one of the old Jewish teachings of where wisdom is found. You have to let go of what you own in order to take in anything new, almost by definition. If we're only holding on to what we know, then we're not actually able to take in anything. And when I walk into a room, I want to know what's going to happen tonight, you know. And even when I'm playing with musicians and we've rehearsed, I tend to complicate things sometimes, just for the sake of making sure we don't get too comfortable, which they may or may not like. You just throw a little complication, some notes in there that don't really work, and then everybody turns around. What is that? You know, but suddenly we're all listening. You know, and it's like we get out of our railroad track way of being, and we start.
And there's an immediacy in it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll play a little bit of that BJ concert now.
All right.
Noah, you could have been a cantor. You could have been a rabbi.
Could have been a contender.
You could have been president. What was the decision, just in terms of your career, particularly in the Jewish firmament, to take the path you did?
I actually was on a rabbinical path at one point, and I found myself looking around the room and saying, oh, everybody else here seems to be enjoying this a lot more than I'm enjoying this. We were spending hours and hours in front of the Talmud and the texts and kind of laboring through, and I was sitting in a chair all day long, and I was like, I want to move, I want to dance, I want to express, I want to sing, and I wasn't getting enough of that in my, and even I actually have the honor of teaching at HUC as well, Hebrew Union College, in the cantorial school. I find it still, even though the school is about teaching cantors, there's still a lot of sitting, writing, thinking, looking, watching, but not like I want to be. You would think cantorial school would just be singing all day long, you know, and that's what I would imagine it would be. But so I was finding myself frustrated that I was trying to pursue a spirituality, and I was not finding a way to embody it in that space. And so I kind of needed to separate myself and then go into different spaces with intentional movement that was happening. And that wasn't necessarily Jewish spaces, but I was finding my spirituality through movement and through the expression of my body. And then I've been trying to kind of bring that into Jewish intentional spaces as well, because I just can't not move. It's just part of how my human spiritual experience.
And you are asked to lead services. I don't know if you're doing it as much as you used to, but I know you've done it a lot. Do you, as honest as you can be, experience some pushback from cantors who are a little bit like, wait a second, this guy's not ordained, and here he is creating this extraordinary prayer experience. I did all the homework. I did, is there any kind of sensitivity there?
That's a great question, thank you. And I really feel that, because there's a lot, people have spent a lot of time. My father was a cantor for many years, and so there's a lot of deep respect for the profession and for the pursuit. And I very much don't call myself a cantor. I think actually your mother taught me that. Your mother works with a lot of cantors, and people sometimes mistakenly call your mother a cantor. And she's like, nope, I'm not a cantor. It's not what I do. And I also am not a cantor. It's not what I do. But I write songs, and I think that my spirituality is just human. It doesn't necessarily mean that, someone's spiritual, that means they have to be a rabbi or they have to serve a community in that way. I'm a spiritual being. To me, that's just part of being human. And so that pours through me through music. But to me, I think rabbi, cantor, that's a service position. That's a position of service to a particular community. And that wasn't necessarily my path.
Elana, I want to talk a little bit about the process for you. Because many people, will ask a composer, is it words or music? And clearly, with this group, it's much more organic. But when you are writing for something, or I know you're commissioned to write a piece, how do you start? Just give people a sense.
That's a good question. I will say, during the last couple of years of the pandemic, that was one of the. It's weird to say like silver linings, blessings, whatever, but a nice thing that happened for me, because I wasn't able to be visiting congregations as much as that I started to be commissioned to write a lot of pieces, which I hadn't done before. And of course, at the beginning, it's a little scary because you don't know if someone else's directive thing is going to fit in with your creative process. But I've actually found it to be quite freeing in a way to be given that kind of a structure, because you sort of, it's not just about being inspired by a given text or being, you know, taken away by some sort of improvisation on an instrument. It's like, you know, being asked to dive deep in a particular way, and oftentimes into text that I'm not particularly, you know, connected to or familiar with or inspired by before I really dig in. So that's a newer part of my writing process, is in the commission world, and I've been really enjoying that. I think in general, I really just, I mean, I don't know, I feel like we all would answer this slightly differently, but maybe somewhere in the fundamental is the idea of, again, trying to leave yourself as open and not judgmental, and get the pieces that are editing away, you know, and that's also a core to what makes me feel the most connected, Jewishly, communally, spiritually, is about sort of, again, letting go, letting myself be as open as I can. And so I think that a lot of my process is about that. I do a lot of improvising on instruments and try and put the recorder on while I'm doing it and try to capture something that feels like it was, you know, like a little lightning, and give it a shape and give it a structure and try to build it into something. But a lot of it is about, you know, unlearning the ways that we edit ourselves. And actually the class that I teach at HUC right now is a class with Cantor Jack Mendelson, a legend of Chazanut, and we teach a class together that's called Improvisation and Integration, and it's about helping these sort of his work in Chazanut, traditional Chazanut, that style of cantorial singing, live in the realm of the kind of music that we all write. And the improvisation part of that, which is the part that I'm in charge of, is the work that you're talking about, Noah, of, you know, trying to break these students out of all of the structures that have been put on them creatively, and to get into a zone of feeling like maybe this idea that just entered my mind could come right out of my mouth and I wouldn't even judge it for a second, and what would happen. And so I feel really privileged to be in the work, in that creative work, because it also helps to fuel my own willingness to be open.
And Joey, you're so focused on listening, and I wonder during the pandemic, when you couldn't be surrounded by other people for a stretch, how did that affect your music in that time?
Oh yeah, well, first of all, I'm an introvert, and you know, just having the chance to be quiet for a while was really nice for me. And
you're an introvert. You're in the middle of crowds pounding.
I know. I do this thing. I don't know why, but. And just to have the chance to step back from that kind of that harangue, and listen inwardly a little bit more, and also spend more time with my family, like daily, hourly, was really helpful. And yeah, this sense of I found myself writing more music to psalms, which are usually written in the singular. They're King David at midnight, you know, talking about his struggles. You know.
Do we know that's when he was writing them?
Yes, right before that quote you said in the Talmud, it says he woke up at midnight and he started composing.
Not 2 a.m. It was midnight. Midnight.
Yeah, and he writes all the songs, and I found that to be. It was actually one of the most productive times I've had in life yet. Just to not be running around too much, and to be more focused and practicing a lot has had a big impact on. I mean, getting to practice my instruments that I love so much. I felt like I was 23 again, you know.
Fantastic.
It's really nice.
So as we finish here, I kind of want to end with the biggest question, which is God. Where does God come in with your music, and how you not necessarily feel it, but translate it for others? Are you even mentioning God when you teach a nigun or create one in the room? Is for all of you, as you're writing, or as you are, I want to say more, bringing your music to others. How does God fit in? And Joey, I'm going to let you
Joey,
start.
how does God fit in?
Small question.
Well, I mean, for me, God is the sense of the interconnectedness of all, right? It's this sense of what was, what is, what will be. It's kind of the totality of all, right? And we're all looking from amidst our alienation and from amidst our kind of loneliness to to connect with that stream of what's been before us, what will come after, right, and what will. And music, for me, just kind of does that without even needing to discuss, right? It's like as soon as there's a word, a little phrase of music, or a little rhythm, or a little something, a little movement, like you're saying, a little tenua, a little movement of the soul, right? Suddenly we're moving in the direction of connecting with that holy blessed oneness.
Elana?
That was beautiful. I think I've had experiences in the last just few weeks, actually, as more congregations have been having fuller sanctuaries and people back in the sanctuary, and sometimes without masks, of hearing a full, joyous, robust singing of, Shabbat Psalms or Lachad Odi, and I'm getting a little goosebumpy right now as I'm talking about it. Mm-hmm. The sound of people singing fully together feels like just the purest expression of God to me. It's similar to what you're saying. I think there's this deep desire to be a part. Not just like, I don't want to be isolated and alone and no one's like me, but be a part of something. Let's swim in the same stream, like we're all going in the same direction, and a part of the chain of what came before us and what comes after us, and something about that sound, particularly, of course, after this extended period of time of not hearing it, and like leading in a spirited way in front of your computer, it completely lifted me like right off the ground the last few Shabbatot, and I think that there's a deep truth to what connects us in those moments and how free we can be. Hearing each other's voices next to us nice and loud. And I think that's part of what, at least for me, that's part of what was feeling starved in the last couple of years. It's just being reminded of that, powerful connection that we have.
Mm.
Thank you. Noah?
Yeah, actually, just 2 nights ago, I was in Chicago. I was doing an event in Chicago, and I was on stage. This was not a service; it was a concert. I was on stage, and we were singing "On My Awake," which has become kind of an anthem in a lot of communities. And I started crying. I couldn't hold back the tears on stage, and not necessarily that I need to hold back tears, but it's like this wave of emotion came over me just hearing the community sing back together again. I do think that like the greatest suffering is the separation, like the moment of disconnect from the umbilical cord of the divine, of that, and that we are always trying to kind of reconnect. And music is this way of like reminding us, oh right, there's like always connection here. There's always the possibility. I'm looking up and I'm seeing a disconnected cable right there. But there's always the opportunity to connect, to reach out, to reach back. And so community does it, music does it, movement does it, and like we can look into the eyes of another person and we can see our own divinity and mirrored back at us, and that's where I find it, and it's in the melody, it's in the people, it's in the song, it's turning our breath into song. I mean, it's everywhere. The question is not where is God, where isn't God? It's in everything.
Thank you. Thank you, Noah Aronson, Elana Arian, Joey Weisenberg. I want to tell our audience that they each have a website, just because if you want more of their music, and I take the deep dive too often than I want to admit, please go to their websites and listen and enjoy and share. Thank you for being part of this today, and thank you for your music.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining us for In the Spotlight, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, Post Office Box 360, Stamford, Connecticut 06904. Or you can call the JBS Pledge Line at 833-MY-JBS-TV. That's 833-695-2788. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. We thank you for your kind support.